We have here are some of the coolest guys I know, and also some of the smartest guys in their field. So it's going to be a really great and fun, and I would say you're going to walk away learning a lot more than you did, and you might walk away a bit more confused than you were. So I would like to go ahead and start on the left here for introductions, and if you could just tell us who you are, what you do, and just something that we don't know about you.
So my name is Eric Rigney, and I think I have an interesting backstory. I think most of you are here to figure out how to get a job. My story was I didn't get into the industry until I was 34. I was wanting to make movies since I was 10, but I finally figured it out that I had to be in the building in order to start learning how to do it. So I just took whatever job I could get to get inside, and I was a laborer in the sound department at a studio, and then I worked my way up, and I just looked for opportunities. And I think part of what I learned was that when you are a lot of times people are chasing what's already happening versus getting in front of what's happening. So I learned that getting in front is a little easier. I also learned that understanding the technology and the technical was a way in, because a lot of people don't study the technology, and in studying technology you get in the room. So for me, what I wound up doing is I wound up becoming the first Avid technician, the nonlinear editing system. That was something that was coming up on the horizon at the time. And I didn't know how to work on a computer when I started. So I had to quickly learn. I did a lot of reading, a lot of cramming and trying to figure that out. And then I wound up, I was at Sony Pictures, and I worked my way up as a technician, and 20 years later, I left as the vice president in charge of Sony Pictures post-production operations, the facilities. And I was overseeing 2 different departments, 10 different services, over 100 different people, and we were grossing around $60 million. And then I left and sailed around the world with my wife and 2 kids. So now I'm coming back, and I'm an intern again. So I'm figuring out, how do I get back in? And so understanding what had worked for me before, I didn't want to get in line behind everybody else. I figured I'd get in front and let the industry catch up in front of me. So Eric here, you're going to meet him, Eric Weaver at ETC, was gracious enough to let me play in the sandbox, if you will, in virtual production. And in there, I started looking where I could fit, and I listened to the sound in the virtual production stages, and it was echoing. And it was so bad, I asked Eric, how do you record dialogue in such an environment? He said, I don't know. So why don't you study it? So I did. So today, I am the world's subject matter expert on how to record dialogue in a virtual production stage and eliminate reverberation. So I created my own little path. So I guess what I'm suggesting right away with my story is, create your own path. Get in the room and then show them your work ethic. Be there early. Don't be there on time. Be there early. Smile. Be a positive thinking person. And also have integrity. If you make a mistake, own it, because they can solve it faster if they know that there's something going on. And then if you do that, and if a mistake happens, they'll know it's not you because you would have said it if it were. And then the other thing is to always learn. You're always learning. It never stops. So that's my story. Kind of boring, right? Anyway.
That's an awesome story. I'm AJ Wedding. I'm the co-founder of Orbital Studios and the director of virtual production there. My story is not quite as cool. I've been involved in the industry for the last 22 years, just all over the place, from script development to PA to all over the place. But I echo what he says. Just get in the room.
My name is Eric Weaver. I work for the ETC. It's a nonprofit think tank based out of USC's film school. I basically report up to the CTOs of Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal, Paramount, Sony, Epic Games, and a couple others. And we look at technology as it evolves, and we get to kind of be on the tip of the spear to play with that stuff. So I personally started in on virtual production about 3 years ago with a project called Ripple Effect. And then recently I was on Fathead, which is a much larger production, which we did, that we had several of these people involved in here.
This is going to be hard to beat after these 3 over here, but...
Are you kidding?
I'm just kidding.
This is Felix.
My name is Felix. I'm the CEO and owner of a company called Narwhal Studios. I like what he said around creating your own path. I did start it as an artist. Eventually, I became a business owner, and I looked to applying virtual production and pre-production. So we got lucky, and we were the guys that did all the pre-production for The Mandalorian Season 1, and now we've done 7 seasons of introducing to the artist and people that typically wouldn't use virtual production to virtual production. Virtual production for a long time was dedicated to mocap and to animation and to the mind of a director, and I always wanted to use virtual production for the mind of production designers, art directors, and people that really wanted to create the plan in pre-production early on so that they could then have a successful shoot or have a successful product. So that's how I created my own path, and I hope that maybe some of the stories that we shared today could help you get where you want to get.
Cool.
So I'm Tom Thodiamplakal. I grew up in India. I worked in advertising and went to film school in Europe, and then got to work with Bollywood filmmakers and some really big movies. One of them is Three Idiots. If anyone wants to watch it, it's on Netflix. And when I got here, I produced a documentary called Seed, the Untold Story, which was nominated for an Emmy. And virtual production is something that I'd been investigating before this wave had come. I'd seen what Lux Machina had done with something for Oblivion, and that had kind of got my wheels turning. And when this came around, I really looked for some way to get into the Unreal Fellowship, and finally did. And that got me to ETC and Eric Weaver, and I got to be the virtual production producer on it and work with all these wonderful minds and learn more and more about it. And I think it is not just the way of the future, it is here. It's already here, and if anyone wants to make movies, that's going to happen. There's a lot of options for people to bring creativity to it. I think the way of storytelling is going to change as well. And so get on it early, as Eric Rigney mentioned, and make your own path.
Wow. Okay, so that was awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. And I want to kind of just jump into what you said earlier about how everything is changing. Can you just give some examples and what you feel and how things are changing in industry and how that does affect the jobs as well? I know, Felix, you got a lot of this too, so you'll be next.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I come from a storytelling background, and that's at the heart of everything we do. And I grew up learning classical cinema and filmmaking techniques and grammar. And what I'm seeing right now is that the way that audiences are engaging with content has changed so much because of the way that technology has evolved. What my parents used to consider an engagement with a story is different from how younger generations are engaging with story. It's become more involved. People don't want to just be passive viewers. They want to be actively involved with what they're participating in. And I think that's going to change the landscape of what we consider as stories and the way that we want to be a part of it. So interactive storytelling, movies, the way that we consume it, are going to move into a 3D immersive world. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but I can see a lot of discussions that are happening, and I'm happy to be part of some of those. And that's where investigations need to happen with the younger generations.
So I'm going to have to second the idea that jump in now. If you look at the history of like a VP Soup or a VFX expert, all these guys didn't know what they were doing in the beginning. You know, they just jumped in, got there early, and began pioneering in the field. And that's exactly where we're at right now. We're in a situation in which the experts are experts who have only been in the field for 3 years. Pretty much at max, unless you're talking about mocap and some of the animation stuff. But in-camera VFX is a brand new field, and it's an opportunity to just skyrocket to the top if you can show some of these qualifications of hard work being there. A wonderful example of this would be Nam Lee, who on our original film, he was simply taking notes and recording all the Zoom meetings. That's his only job on the first production. And on the next production, he did, gosh,
Almost 1,000 boards.
1,000 storyboards, plus the Unreal gray boxing, plus metahuman work,
Blueprints, all
blueprints.
kinds of stuff.
He really evolved, and now actually his very first job is at Disguise, which
I thought you were going to say now we all work for him.
no, but he was asking me earlier where to buy panels, so yeah.
One of the things that I find that with the art that's so exciting, and I'm kind of envious of it, what Felix is doing, is you're shooting movies virtually before it's very expensive. Virtual production, when you go onto an LED stage, is very expensive per minute because of the technology, the personnel, the power, the compute, all that's happening at once. There's a lot going on, and to mitigate the cost, you want to do an extensive preparation, and you can do that virtually. And by But what I mean by that is you can create the whole movie virtually with the camera lenses, the lights, all the lighting instruments, the blocking, all the sets, the costumes. And so this is where the artists come in. You know, you're making the set designs, you're making the costumes, and then as the filmmakers, you're setting up your camera situations, and you're virtually making the movie. And then you can then edit all that together. And then when you walk onto the stage, there's still going to be changes. There's still things going to happen. But there's been a choreography that's happened virtually that what Felix is doing allows for. There's an understanding, and the more people who see it on the crew, the more likely they are to get these setups more quickly and understand what's going on. I think, you know, you might have to lower the moon a little bit, or raise the car, or, you know, make the clouds a little brighter, or whatever else happens. But this is an exciting place where you can be very, very creative at that end. And on my side, what I'm learning is the added value is if people consider what they're doing in an acoustical sense, to design their sets that are acoustically smart, the costumes are acoustically smart, and that takes learning, and that's sort of an added value. So that's my 2 cents for reverberation. So.
I was just going to say, after what you said about, you know, people have only been experts for so long. 2 years ago, my company was in my garage, and I called this guy, and I was like, hey, I want to learn what you guys are doing and see if I can help. And he was kind of like, yeah, you'll figure it out. And I think like a year later, I think we had our studio in downtown.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and I've been over the past year and a half virtual production supervisor on 3 series. So it's true, it can happen
Big,
very fast.
real series like.
Yeah, sorry, Snowfall season 5 and 6 for FX, and Justified City Primeval, which is coming out, I think, in next month.
So, I guess my background is a little bit different. I was an environment artist for 8 years with a company at first. And I think the biggest opportunity that I found was that you can learn everything online. And a lot of it is for free, right? And so the modern landscape is one that is very successful for those of us that want to dig into what it is to be an entrepreneur, and what it is to maybe find new ways that the people before us didn't understand, right? We have YouTube now, we have NFTs, we have fucking all these different avenues that actually could get us to that level of success that you might want, that others don't understand. And I think tapping into what that is and tapping into what you want to do and what you feel like you're here for is the challenge. Because there's a million different things to do now. There's a million different ways to work. And everything's getting easier and faster. So those that I feel are going to rise to the top are those that want to strategize. AI is going to make certain things faster, but those that won't get replaced are those that are thinking about the things that the AI can't do, which is how to make the AI look like it isn't AI, or how to, you know, so there's a new opportunity in the modern day to think outside of the box and to be different than everyone else, because you have opportunities with social media to market yourselves that no one else had before. Because you have the resources online at a cost that isn't going to put you in debt for the rest of your decade like I was. Because you have opportunities to actually tap into professionals like us that are trying to actually provide this information that I didn't get till I was on the 19th movie, right? And so I think that a lot of what that adds up to is looking at these things, like how easy it is to make a game these days, how easy it is to make a marketing opportunity for yourself on social media, and then grabbing this information and looking at it and going, okay, I have an idea, and at first I thought it was just for a film, but guess what? If I make a VR experience out of that same thing, a film, a game, a commercial, all of a sudden your thing is worth 5 times more than it was when you first thought about it. And if you were going to sell your IP or your product, you could just sell 1 piece of it and still own 4 pieces of it, right? So think outside of the box. Take advice from people on YouTube. Take advice from your family as well, but think about things in a way that you feel like is going to motivate you, nobody else. Because if you feel motivated and you feel like you could do it, no one else really matters, because the internet's going to support you. And that's I think the biggest opportunity in the modern day.
My mic has, no, it is alive. It went red on me, but it's okay now. I want to kind of expand on that, Felix. So what are the different types of, I guess, skills people would need now to be able to get into this industry that's constantly evolving like this?
So I'll approach that from a broader perspective. When you look at in-camera VFX or on-set virtual production, you have three primary pillars. The first pillar is asset creation. The second pillar is building and operating stages. And the third pillar is shooting on stages. So I think you got to dig into each of these categories and say, what speaks to me? What am I interested? And I'll leave it for some of the other people here to actually tear apart some of those jobs.
What was the question again?
Well, the kind of skill sets,
Skill sets.
drawing.
Skill
one of the
sets.
things is
Skill set.
Tom was talking about drawing. He said, start off with if you know how to draw. I mean, a lot of people doing this stuff and they don't even know how to draw.
Skill set wise, I guess I'm of the kind, because I'm so addicted to what I'm addicted to, and I find that other people are into what they're into. I think just get into more of what you're into, right? There's going to be, it's everyone else's job to market you, right? You're the student. You're the one that they're selling to. So they're going to tell you that their idea is the one that you should get on board with. And it's up to you to look at that and go, is that the idea that I want to get on board with? Because if you feel inspired by it, there's going to be a million different jobs for that thing, right? Like if you draw, you could be an architect that works for architects, right? Or you could be a person that draws that works on concept art for film, or you could be a person that works in an art department for games, or you could be a person that works in broadcast. So there's so many different ways to find a job. And I think that the skill set that is most important is perspective, and maybe even business development, maybe even a little bit of learning how to market yourself, and then finding those resources that tap into your creative self. And if it's just drawing, get really good at drawing. And believe me, you're gonna have opportunity. If it's potentially like what we did, was we found our skill sets and we found an opportunity with virtual production, and we said, oh, virtual production could kind of superpower some of what we do, right? So, but we really did start by leaning into what we love to do. And I think that's where you guys should start with. Or if I was gonna give any advice around what's the skill set, it's focus and a little bit of perspective around business development. Like the focus to do the creative thing you love, and try not to get distracted with what other people are telling you want to love. And then from there, just learn a little bit about business development so that you know how much you're worth, so that you can actually talk about how to negotiate yourself to like these industries, because all of a sudden, creative mediums are becoming more valuable, in my opinion, than any other medium in the world, which means that you are going to work directly with the man. Not the guy that worked 8 levels under Bill Gates, with Bill Gates himself, because now you're that valuable. And that means that you have to be able to talk about yourself that way, and you have to have the confidence to do that. And so my advice would be find the inspiration to do that.
Yeah, I think for the side where you're on set and you're going to be, an on-set virtual production operator or supervisor, whatever that is, I'd say the biggest skill that you need is on-set experience. So I would take work as a PA. I would do anything, be an extra. Just be on a set as much as you can, because there are things that, I've hired people in the past and brought them to sets, and they stick out like sore thumbs. And unfortunately, that's a very bad thing.
The term's actually setiquette.
Etiquette, yes, exactly. Understanding how things work, who you're supposed to talk to, who you're probably not supposed to talk to, how important every minute is. I think as artists, sometimes we're able to go, well, I can probably solve that in like 30 minutes or so. And, that doesn't work on set. If something's 5 minutes, it's a problem. So I would say that is really what got me going, was all my on-set experience, just because I kind of knew I had on-set and visual effects experience, and I thought, oh, this technology is going to be something where this DP, who knows everything about being on set, and this visual effects guy or virtual art guy, they're not going to be able to talk to each other. So I can be that guy in between. And that's essentially where I thought, let's figure this one out. But having both sides of that is really helpful.
I want to second what he said, actually. Even though I think what made me different than a lot of other people was that even when I was learning my craft, I always wrote down the people I met and what they did for a living, right? And I think knowing the people, knowing what they do, and then the other point which you said is knowing how long things take, which is really difficult when you're starting. It's actually the hardest part. It's knowing how long it takes you to do something. So starting to quantify your time and going, okay, you know, at first, this is going to take me 20 minutes to make this thing, and then actually recording how long that took is very valuable.
Yeah. So, I mean, through all this, one of the big things is having the mindset and having a mindset to understand where and how you fit into the equation so that you don't obsess about what you do without knowing what the end product is. So you always want to know what that end product is and how you fit into it, and then figure out, okay, like AJ said, on set, downtime is very expensive. So yeah, if it was just rehearsal day, you could take 30 minutes to solve something and do it a certain way. But on that day, every minute counts, so you have to find the shortest, quickest way to get it done, right? So, and prep allows you to do that. Also, along the way, when you have that mindset, when you're hit with a problem, you start to break it apart into its components and remember that entire path of problem solving, so that that is in your mind at all times. For me, filmmaking was something that I always wanted to do, and one of the roles that I wanted to understand very well was directing. And later in my career, I fell in love with producing. But I started reading a lot of books that would give me insights into the mindset of these people, about how these producers thought, how directors thought. And there was a book by Playboy, which was all their interviews of directors, from Fellini to Coppola and Scorsese and everything. And I remember reading that book obsessively, and my mom was like, "What are you doing?" You know, she thought it was a Playboy book. It was Playboy interviews.
It's for the
very
articles,
insightful.
Mom.
Yeah.
No one's ever heard that before.
Yeah. So find as much material as you can that puts you into the mind of the people that you admire, and try to get that from them.
And Eric, on the end there, the way you found your deal is very unique. So what skill sets would you be looking for? Can you expand that?
Again, it's an attitude, and echoing what they've said is, your passion, your purpose. What is that? And it can change. Getting into the room, even if it's you want to get on set as close as you can. You may wind up being a security guard at first, and getting into the room, and then you're so helpful that before you know it, you're a PA, or you never know. And also, there's the technical side of things. They need technicians to fix the equipment. So you have all these creative people, but when it goes down, it's not turning on. What happens then? So being a technician also helps you get into the room, and understanding the technology is a way. The technicians sort of all talk to each other, so you get access to equipment. So when the stage is down, or it's quiet or whatever, you can often shoot your own stuff. Because, we're going to be down for a week. It's okay if I shoot yeah, sure, go ahead. Because they know you're not going to break the equipment. You're the one who repairs it all the time. So, and then also winds up being between other studios. You can wind up sharing stuff because you're a technician. So there's different ways of getting in there. And a real quick story that's, so old school studio, I guess, guy that I might be, is that, there was I was telling a story to AJ, there was a security guard that was working at the studio, and he met a producer, and the producer was interested in his story, and he said, "You should write a script about your life. It's amazing." So the guy does. He writes the script, and then after many, many, many rewrites, it's going to go up, and there's a director that wants to do it. It's a first-time director. He's an actor. He's a famous actor, but he wants to do his first movie. And so he's picking up the script. The security guard tells his buddy who's working in the boutique selling the souvenirs for the studio, "Hey, they're going to shoot my life story. No one knows me better than you. We're friends. You should go audition." So he gets his agent to go up there and make sure he gets an audition. He goes and he auditions, and then the first-time director winds up picking him, walking into the boutique, and said, "Derek, you're my Antoine Fisher." And Derek, and it was Denzel Washington who was the director. So it's just, here's a guy working in a boutique. He was doing acting on the side. It wasn't like he wasn't acting. He was acting. And here the guy is a security guard. But that's just a role that you're playing. Play that role very, very well. It will be noticed that you're a good worker, whatever that is. The microwave's dirty, clean it. Plants need to be watered, water them. Whatever it is. People see good, work ethic, attention to detail, problem solver, good attitude, you know, someone who's fun to be around, because you live with each other more than you live with the people you've married, you know. So you want to hang out with people you like to hang out with. You don't want to hang out with a sourpuss, you know.
That's actually the story at Tesla. Tesla had solved a problem for Edison, and Edison then threw him out onto the street and refused to hire him. And he dug ditches in the city of New York. And basically, people saw how hard a worker he was, and they began to introduce him to other people.
And don't be afraid to ask someone that you admire if you could pick their brain, right? Like, be willing to be uncomfortable. You know the thing that you want to learn. You know that there's people out there that you wish you could ask. There's nothing wrong with just going, hey, can I take you to lunch? Just to ask you a couple questions. Or hey, what do you think I can do to arrive at maybe what you do, or like what that person does? Don't be afraid to ask. I think that fear is a lot of what holds us back, but really, people like us, we want people to ask because we don't know what people want to learn, and so don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, and I'm Tom. I'm a recovering perfectionist. So that's my next advice is really don't chase perfection. Just be consistent, and you'll get a long way.
Well, Tom, that was actually perfect, by the way, because my next question for is like, hey, what is the one thing that you found that got in your way the most?
Self-criticism.
He beat me to the punch. When I said don't be afraid, it's because of that. It's those voices of people that tell you that maybe it's a bad idea, or it's the fact that I always wanted to do the best job. I was also my worst enemy for many years, and I worked for another company for a long time, and I wanted to do my next thing, and so I think, yeah, give yourself a pass, and be willing to just put it out there and make more mistakes more often, faster. Like, put yourself in the position where you could make some decisions where you know, where you don't know how it's going to pan out. And I think through that not knowing how it's going to pan out and seeing the ones that don't pan out and the ones that do is how you learn which ones are good or bad ideas. So I would say it's turn that little voice in your head, tone it down.
Yeah.
So I'll elaborate a little bit on that criticism idea. And basically, you've got to come in with a little bit of naivete and a little bit of ignorance as to the challenge of your problem. Life is a lot like The Hobbit or something, where you're on a journey and you need to meet people along the road that are going to help you, period. You're not going to finish the journey. And people like Tom or Eric or other people. And it might be an overwhelming task that you've taken on, but you don't realize that completely.
And don't take things personally. I mean, when I was a young creative, I mean, I put in 5 nights into something, and I take it to the client, and they have a completely different idea of it, and I take it personally. I'm like, it's not. And then, you know, you put yourself in their shoes, and you go, well, the brand manager cares about what the billboard's going to do for his business, not about, you know, whether I use the right font, the colors, or whatever. You know, so being able to put yourself in the shoes of who you're dealing with and never taking anything personal will get you a long way, too.
Yeah, this is maybe a long way to explain this, but after World War II, let's start there.
What kind of games were you playing back then?
Yeah, right. Everybody who came back and was basically this film industry were people from the military. And so the structure of how movies are made and the departments and all of that and the way that you only talk to your commanding officer and that kind of thing, that all came out of the military. And it's something that sadly we've had to deal with for the last 60 or so years. That being said, that is dying. The idea that you need to have a big ego to be a big person in this industry is dying. Sadly, not fast enough, as we all know. But it is dying, and the people that are coming up in this industry, they had to put up with it. They don't want it to be the way they have to go to work every day. And so we're finding now on a lot of sets that it's not like that anymore. And the more you learn and ask questions from people around you. Like on Snowfall, it's a really amazing set where PAs are encouraged to walk up to the DP and ask him a question. As long as he's not busy, it's like, how come you put that light there? You know, and the DP will say, oh, because I wanted to get a kick off of this. You know, so like, I think that that is changing in this business. And so for you to want to be a part of it, keep that idea of collaboration in mind. Virtual production itself requires more collaboration, and it gets the DP and the VFX people and the production designer and the producers all talking to each other at the same time. And it's very exciting, and I think it's going to help push that narrative of a better workplace for the film industry.
I want to piggyback on what Felix said about what we call as an information interview. Almost anyone will take an informational interview if you want to ask them questions. And the reason why they do it is because they want your enthusiasm. It's kind of like it's their energy. If you do something for 10, 20 years, it gets sort of old hat and you forget that what you do is special. And then when you see someone who's very eager come into your office and all this excitement, you kind of feed off that, and it's like, oh yeah, I do something special. So they're very interested to share with you their knowledge and their ideas. Not to say that what they say is accurate or whatnot, it's just their opinion, right? And the other thing is, everyone's afraid of competition. Oh, it's such a competitive field. What are you doing? You should be a whatever, pick the list out of the classified ads. The competition, my feeling is if you're really good at what you do, there's always space for someone really good at what they do. So I don't worry about the competition. I say that's nonsense. Another way to get in is you want to get your face around. So there's a lot of associations. Find the associations that sort of dovetail on what you want to do. Get involved, volunteer, because the person who's handing out the name tags sees everybody. If they see your name or they see your face enough, then you become part of that clan, that circle. And then also another thing to do is look how they dress. Now I walked around and watched everyone dressed here. It's amazing. I mean, the colors are great. The creativity is off the charts. And to me, I love it. But when you want to get involved in something, kind of look at their uniform and match them. And then also learn the vocabulary. Because when you speak and they say something, you want to know what that is. And in this world of virtual production, the vocabulary is so new, it's changing, it's morphing. In fact, ICVFX has a glossary that they're trying to develop so people understand what means. And the words are changing. There was a brain bar, now it's a volume control, now it's a this and a that. So learning that vocabulary, you understand what people are saying, and then you can also, when you have a conversation, be intelligent and then dress like them. Unfortunately, we're tribal, and humans are, so dress like the tribe, whatever you're trying to get into.
Yeah.
I agree fully on the vocabulary. Less on the dressing, because I think that self-expression is really important.
Well, he visited some indigenous tribes and dressed like them. I've
Yeah,
seen
right.
pictures.
We've seen the pictures.
When I sailed around the world, so when I was in Easter Island, I went in full body paint and hair, and I mean all the feathers and stuff. I'm not a. So I say I dress to mix in, because this is what I would say. If I'm walking through a jungle, I want the best machete I can get, right? When I'm walking through the jungle of the corporation, I need to dress like the person I want to be. And not to say I want to be the CEO, but the next step I want to be. And there is a dress. Like technicians dress a certain way, creative people dress, and it does make people, it's a subconscious conversation that you're having. It is true.
It's funny you mentioned vocab and how, it's funny, like Felix basically developed half the vocab we have for all this stuff. And like different people around the world that are all doing it are all calling it different things. And so everybody's trying to get together. I know ETC is really trying to put together that vocab of let's all call this the same thing, because in reality you're all talking about different things.
I think there's something really that we're all pointing to. Find your own community, really. Like find where your passion is. You're gonna find a group that talks like you, that dresses like you, that likes the things that you like, and thankfully, because of the internet, you have a global community. You're not stuck to Hollywood anymore, so you will find that community. It's inevitable at this point. I come from a very small town, and so I'm a millennial. So we didn't have internet at the beginning. So my biggest fears when I was younger came from community and from not fitting in. I was a nerd, I'm gay, so there's a lot of things that I was facing with being in a little island. And so what I found was as I got older and the opportunities that you guys have is that you can just you can be yourself and find people that are just like you. You don't have to have the fears that maybe you had around having to dress and look assimilate, because it's a global community now. And when you go global and you start looking at it that way, you start realizing that, oh, I can find a mentor that is black, gay, and also owns a creative agency, right? So I think a lot of the work is in finding what you love and kind of putting away some of the voices. Even all of this advice, as soon as you walk out, forget about it.
You just wasted an hour of your life.
Just do whatever you want, really. But I hope what it gives you is the motivation to be curious and to look it up and to realize that there are more people like you out there.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a middle-class household, so the advice I was getting when I was starting my career was largely, go do whatever you can, and they'd put me on a set and say, be a PA to somebody and something, and I saw how they were treating them, and I'm like, I can't be treated that way, so I'm going to do what I love and then find my position when I get there. So instead of going into that field, I went into advertising and publishing and then the internet and all that kind of stuff. And I went to film school, and when I came back and I wrote a letter to one of the big filmmakers in India, and I had a whole list of people I was going to write letters to, but before I could finish my letter number 2, the first one responded saying, I'm in the US, but as soon as I come in, you're meeting me first thing. And I worked for him, and those are the movies I made, so yeah.
Well, that is great. And AJ, I didn't know about that World War II you talked about, and how, but that just goes back to what Eric was saying, is how you needed to fit in. And then we've come full circle. What Felix was talking about, I was like, no, that's actually not happening anymore. So this is great. I'm glad we're all up here. And I do have one more. We're going to turn it over to you guys here pretty soon. So I know everyone's probably got a lot of questions. But this one's a question that would love to ask you guys, each individually too, is if there's one thing that you could do to change things, to make it more accessible or make it more inclusive, what are those things that you would change? And go ahead, whoever wants to start first, and let's.
I don't see it as being exclusive. I mean, from what I'm seeing, everyone who walks through the door is entertained and say, "What do you do? What do you bring?" I don't see. I mean, maybe because I'm a white male, I don't see it. But I see just the opposite. I see people actually looking for diversity, and I think that it's an exciting time. I mean, obviously I could be completely ignorant to it, but I just see people really attractive to the other right now.
I think that, let's go back to the 70s this time.
We're working our way up.
He was a
Dating
history
yourself,
professor.
Right.
We'll be 2020 by the time we get done.
I'll call you the professor from now.
Okay, sounds good. I think like the mid-70s, I think a lot of the marketing for movies went behind the director's name, right? And so everybody was talking about the director, and oh, you want to be a director because you make movies. But there are hundreds and thousands of people that make movies, and they're all important. The director is not the most important than the person in the room. And I wish that would change to where people realize their value as a part of a production and not just as the director.
Not a film by.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I'm wrestling with this one. We have, I have basically a grant that gives it to an individual of diversity. And that actually almost disappoints me that I have to say that, because I work with some of the best people out there. Hands down, nobody's better. C. Craig, Abby, all these people are just absolutely amazing. Yeah,
Just
absolutely
kidding.
amazing people.
All
And
of us.
so I really do think that there's a lot of opportunity right now, and we really want to help lift some of these people up,
I think actually it kind of goes off of yours as well, and AJ's. I think internet is still not something that like the generations that have all the knowledge is very familiar with, or engages with in the way that maybe everyone in this room does, right? So a lot of those conversations that you're talking about, people, they are willing to tell you if you can ask them, but who has access to them? Pretty much nobody does. Like those AAA directors out there, James Cameron, Steven Spielberg, they don't have the time and the attention, right? Or that they're working on things. And so if I could change anything, it would be to provide more perspective from high-level thinkers that are entrepreneurs and business-minded, but also creatives, right? And so those are the ones that people don't get to hear from typically. The guys that are doing big change, they're the ones that are working behind doors. And I think as younger entrepreneurs go up, since this generation is about sharing and about lifting each other's up, and we see the value of sharing, then I think that that's the biggest change that I'm excited to see. It's finding perspective in ways that aren't going to get us into a $200,000 in debt, right? Or whatever that is. Finding a way to get the people that you're working with right now, not to hear it from us, but to hear it directly from them, right? Because we're, in many ways, we've made it to where we are, but there's other people that have made it much higher than us, and we are, in many ways, their messengers sometimes, right? So I think there's, in the future, the biggest change I look forward to is that perspective that those individuals can provide us. And if they can't, then the perspective that we will provide you with as we grow in the industry, right? This is a new industry, and there's probably 3 years, but in a decade from now, we have the opportunity then to continue these messages and hopefully help you guys see it too.
And kind of to play off both of their comments here, when you look at the Spielbergs and the Lucases, there was a radical shift in the way filmmaking was made with that generation. The filmmakers had kind of, to some degree, grown stale, and these people stepped in and changed everything. Well, we're at that same stage again today. Things have grown stale, and that way that a Spielberg made a movie is not what's going to be the future. It's not what the next generation is going to consume or wants to have part in. And there is a radical opportunity here for the next group of Spielbergs and Lucases
I was
to
going to say,
emerge.
we don't even know what that is, right? We don't know what the next step is, actually. The next step comes from your generation, the people that are coming up now. So that's what's really cool.
Yeah. So principles never change, and that's something that I've held on to, is that tools can change, techniques can change, but the principles never change. And especially for me, one of the guiding principles has always been that craft and creativity at its pinnacle is invisible, so that my audience should only speak about the experience and how it made them feel. If they talk about how my camera work was or how some other explosion thing was or anything, then I failed. So that's been my driving principle. When my team and when I'm able to achieve that, that's when I know I'm there.
When I was at the studio, I had a bunch of interns, and what I found is that from the higher level institutions, when they would come, they wanted to be writers, directors, or producers, you know. And then the lower ends would come in, the Cal States, they would come in, and they just wanted to work. And there are thousands of jobs, different types of jobs, and people just don't realize that it's not just those three people, or even the editor or the composer. Those are obviously high-end, you know, we see them all the time in terms of they're the highest part of the creative process. But there is creativity in making a footstep. There is creativity in everything that goes on in there. So I think people, even when you look at the credits, I'd say that's about a third of the people who worked on the movie. Mm-hmm. 2/3 are not even visible on that. So don't get hamstrung on the opening credits, you know, or just the first few. There's so much to do. So to everyone, they were all saying, you know, and Felix and everyone saying about how your passion, you know, your purpose, follow that, and then that's going to lead you to where you want to go. If the doors are always closing, that tends to be a sign that it's not the right place. What I find is that when you're doing what you're supposed to do, the doors swing open. They're not even visible to other people, and they swing open for you. That, to me, is a sign that you're on the right path for you.
Yeah. And don't starve for your art. Make it work for you.
Awesome. So we have a few minutes left, and I would like to hear from you guys, the audience, and we have some great minds up here and some questions.
I was wondering if you guys could touch on remote work a little bit and how that's changed the industry or how you think it will change the industry. I know that there's a lot of ways that it benefits artists and a lot of ways that it can kind of erode community in certain ways. And I was wondering if you guys could kind of touch on the pros and cons.
Well, I can't speak to community, but on both of our last productions, we were chasing the sun. So I had teams everywhere from Greece, Eastern Europe, New York, India, all over the place. So we were pulling together, and you can standardize on different tools where you can all work on the same environment, your VAD environment. And so you can be anywhere. A community can be anywhere. It's not like the traditional days of everyone's in LA or Vancouver.
That's a very tough, a good one for me. Yeah. I think about that one a lot. We had a creative agency that was 100 people and we were all remote. And I started the company as a remote company because I myself wanted to be remote. I was an artist, I lived in LA, I moved to Big Bear, I wanted to have my house in Big Bear, now I live in Oregon, right? So with remote work, I think the thing that I've learned the most is that you need to want to work remotely. And you need to understand what working remotely means for you. You might not get to go and have that margarita on Fridays that that we're used to having every Friday with your friends. You might not. It's just a different way of working, and I think companies are still trying to shape the organization as if it was something that you incentivize in the same way you would in person, with parties, with events. When you're remote, incentivization is different. It might have to be by the kind of projects that you're working on or by the kind of alone time that you're getting. Maybe it's that you need more time with your family because you're not getting the community from the company. But I do have to say that for the opportunity it provides artists is incredible, right? All of a sudden, you can actually build a team of friends anywhere in the world that are like-minded to build the thing that you want to build. And you yourself could choose to live anywhere in the world you want that has good internet. You know, if you don't have good internet, then
He lives in Eugene, Oregon.
I don't know where you're going.
I live in New Orleans for most of the year, so.
Yeah, exactly. But as you scale that model, be aware of the kind of people that want to be a part of it, and be honest about it being remote from the get-go and the perks that you get from being remote, but also the things that you won't get, because the sense of community is tricky, right? And guess what? Sense of community is really easy to build when you're all like-minded people. But that's the point, that there might have to be more of a focus around finding like-minded people.
Yeah. And you've got to be accountable for yourself to
Yeah.
make sure that you don't let other things creep on you. And one of the big things, of course, is you need to be visible all the time. You need to have social proof. So people you can work with, people who can employ you, know you exist, and they value you and see you at a certain level. So
Social proof, right? This is a big challenge. All of a sudden, when I was working on Alice in Wonderland, I was on the stage, right? And everyone saw me working on the box. I was the guy that's running the box. The badges, the guy with the badges, everyone's gonna walk by and you're gonna see that guy. That's where the sense of, when I started with like business development, entrepreneurship, with this remote work, all of a sudden you're almost a little business owner that has to make sure that your portfolio carries all that weight that you would get from actually being there in person and making those relationships. To most of my introvert friends, that's a freaking heaven. Okay? For most of my extrovert friends, including myself, it might not be heaven, right? So you have to be aware of your own personality, who you are, and the work that it takes to achieve, to be successful in the office versus out.
And the associations often meet in Zoom meetings. They Zoom, Team, whatever. Mostly Zoom, some Google Meets. And they often meet on a regular basis that way. And a lot of the seminars are being done that way. And some of the seminars are, going into the metaverse as well. But there are ways to remotely participate in those things. And I would seek those out.
Actually, and to go deeper in this, since our company was built off of being remote, we have a multitude of virtual production tools. Like, there's so many ways now to make it something that can actually operate at a AAA level. The biggest reason why people weren't doing it before was because they were afraid of two things: cost and quality. You're not sacrificing those two anymore. Now you got to think about mental health, right? And so that's really, but if cost and quality is out of the way, then most of the work is done. The other one, the rest of it's on you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I know you said, it's going to be the next generation that finds out what next is next, but Are there any technologies, equipment, things that you're seeing or have seen around that you're really passionate about, thinking, oh, that's probably going to be a future thing, but aren't quite there yet, or they're coming down the pipe that you might have heard of that are sweet, that you might passionately speak of?
Well, a lot of us here are big believers in Unreal. So I'm a fellow, and I just went through the ICVFX fellowship. Tom's a fellow. We're heading out to New Orleans next week, actually, for the big conference they have. It's a huge one. On remote collaboration, it's Perforce kind of rules the roost right now. And that is understanding that is very, very tricky and complicated, and I've been in more than one meeting where people have broken down crying, thinking they deleted everything.
Yeah, we're really still in the very early stages of virtual production being adopted by the industry. I'd say 90% of what's happening with LED walls on sets is video playback. And you know, the few shows that are actually doing it, they're really figuring out how is it, you know, it's like Felix did 100% of it for the last year and a half. And now others are starting to come out with it. But I think some of the stuff technology-wise, I would say there's a merging happening between the entertainment industry and the data industry. And it has to happen for various reasons. So one of the things we're trying to do is everywhere that we're gonna have a stage, we wanna make sure those stages are outfitted with proper data centers. We want everything to be on data center standards, because AV standards are no longer okay when everything's about latency and getting the stuff to the stage right away. I think being able to use some of those virtual production tools that that Felix created, you need to have more access to the data, so it's harder to ship it off to a separate VFX company and say, well, you'll see it in 20 weeks. You know, no, I want to see it tomorrow because my production designer wants to know, is that paint going to match what you put up there? And that makes the process faster because, I mean, how many times we talk about this? It's like, it makes the process faster because all the important department heads are seeing it. This is what it's going to look like right now, so they can approve things a lot faster too. So I'd say virtual production is what I'm super excited about because it really hasn't been embraced yet. It's just getting there.
Being the only sound guy. So the fun stuff for me is like, this is an array microphone. It has 80 acoustical sensors on it, and it uses artificial intelligence. And this came from the military, so that they could focus in on conversations instead of a parabolic microphone. They could use this. So now it's going to be more fun on a set. You know, you can really focus in on who's talking. And eventually these array microphones are going to be all over the set, so that I imagine that AI is going to wind up just taking the best version of the conversation of a given actor and create separate tracks out of it. This is the first version of something that's going to be actually usable on set. I'm also into acoustical cameras where you can see sound bouncing around the walls, and that's something that's kind of fun. So that came from the aerospace and automotive industry. A lot of technologies that are on the outside, you know, you can find ways to fit them into what we're doing. And what AJ was talking about with the digital infrastructure, again, the technology side of things, none of this stuff works if it's not plugged in right. None of this stuff works if you don't have the right environmental controls. Again, you get into the room. You learn how to take care of a computer. I didn't know how to take care of a computer. This is against your passion maybe, but maybe it's the way to get into the room. So, you know, we don't always have the opportunity we want up front, but get in and then navigate your way sideways into whatever, you know, crab crawl to the next place.
So I'd also like to give a shout out to Stella over here, who works with Intel, and they're doing some just absolutely amazing things along the technology side. So,
Cool, yeah. So for me, volumetric capture is something that I'm really excited about. I think it's going to change the way that filmmakers think and use performances, environments, all kinds of things. That we're seeing so much happen in so little time. So I'm following that very closely.
are you looking at NERFs?
Yep.
NERF is amazing, or neural radiance fields are absolutely awesome. Okay.
I'm gonna tell my perspective on this one real quick. I think the thing that I'm very excited about is, in general, how much faster and easier it is to do everything. As an artist that used to have to do things by hand, everything by hand, this whole, what we call virtual production, is really just us saying that physical world is now being powered by AI and virtual tools and other virtual production / virtual tools. And so there's a lot of processes that are coming out that need creatives like yourself to teach people how to use it. And so some of that is virtual production and the virtual tools that we even developed that I'm sure as we offer them publicly, people will start going, no, this is how we use it, right? But others that are less obvious are surround AI and I think there's a misconception that AI is going to replace you, but it won't. What it's going to give all of you is the ability to jumpstart your project at a much higher quality and then to change it. And so that jumpstart, that initial stage used to take weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And now, over the next 12 to 24 months, you're going to see AI applied to almost every industry, and you're going to see people like yourself who have a decade less experience than someone like myself doing work at a quality that I could have never done at your age. And so there's something there to look at, right? A lot of what people are thinking about is the fears of how AI is going to, but I would embrace it. And I would go, okay, how is it going to improve pre-production? Well, in pre-production, well, now I got a picture, that's in 2 seconds. How is it going to improve animation? Well, person's faces, you guys have seen them being replaced. How is it going to improve motion capture data? I mean, you could apply it to every single freaking field. It's pretty amazing. So the opportunity to not say AI, to not say virtual production, to not say some, capturing global volumetric capture.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that everything's getting 1,000,000 times faster and easier to use it.
Yeah.
So like, even engineering, I could have never made a game 5 years ago. Now there's blueprints.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be an engineer, and that's huge.
And so I heard someone compare that, and they said Unreal's kind of like getting all of your paints handed to you. It's a tool where you can then dabble in. Where in traditional SIGGRAPH VFX world, you'd have to learn how to mix and create your paints with Blender and all your other tools. You don't have to learn all those separate things now. Now all of a sudden you've got something that can jumpstart exactly what you want to do.
But I do think that this is where I agree, and I also go, find what you want to do, because there are a lot of different softwares out there that are also pioneering, and I think the cool part of Unreal is that it's free and easy to get it, right?
And there's a lot of education
But,
online, like you
but
pointed
the
out.
way that we use Unreal is we use Unreal as the center hub, but we are content creators. So we have software for effects, software for the mountains, softwares for the texturing, softwares for the modeling, software, like all these softwares that different people like yourself go, well, I don't want to model in Maya, I want to model in Blender. That's fine, right? So I wouldn't pigeonhole yourself to thinking that, once again, this is the way to do it, because it really is, what's the thing that motivates you to just do that for the next decade?
Yeah.
Because in a decade's time, you're going to want to do something else. So think about the next 10 years and commit to it, and you're going to be just fine.
Yeah. And with AI and machine learning, I see it as something that can take all the legwork from me so that I can put more heart and brain into it.
So earlier on, you were talking about being in the room, and I had a discussion with Brendan Hay, who's an executive producer over at Warner Animation. But one of the things that he had said is pretty much the best advice that I've ever gotten was essentially, don't be an asshole. So
Oh, yeah.
it's like, if you don't have the skill set, we can at least teach you that stuff, but we can't teach you to not be a dick. So I was going to ask, like, how valid is that and that, but everybody up there shaking their heads yes, so I'm pretty sure it's
I think that's
validated.
again with the shift that they're talking about here. Yeah, some of those big-headed folks were that way at one point, but now you just work with absolutely awesome people, and those are the people who are surviving. What dog wins the race? The one that's getting fed, and we're feeding the good people now.
Yeah.
That's who I want around me, and that's who I'm going to have around me.
Yeah, one of my first hires is a guy named Mark Paletti, and he's an actor. I don't need an actor what I'm doing, but I knew he was not an asshole. He was a good guy, and he was going to figure things out. and he figured out how to do motion tracking. So he became our tracking specialist. But we don't do that every day, so how can I support his salary? Well, I never had to have that conversation because he always finds something to do that's valuable. We are constantly in a growth situation, and so we don't know, half the time we're not communicating things properly. We've got things we're building that we don't even know what they're, where they are right now. And he's, well, let me figure this out. Let me see if I can project manage this. Let me see if I can make sure that these producers have what they need when they come in. I mean, he's just all over the place. Almost never does what he was hired to do. But that guy is going to be the first guy I give the next big thing to, because I know I can trust him.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is trust. That you can trust them. You don't have to, if you're not in the room, you know that you can trust them with the client, with other personnel, that they're going to represent you in the way that you want to be represented, your values, and that's a key point. Is that that goes in line with integrity, and it's really easy to lose your integrity. It can happen in a split second. You can lose years and years of integrity by one stupid comment or, judgment call. So you have to really guard it.
I want to lean into that comment some more, right? I think no one wants to be an asshole, right? And no one likes to work with assholes. So to me, I think that's the lowest bar, right? Like, duh. Who wants to work with an asshole? Be curious. Don't tell, right? If you have a thought, let's say I have a thought that this doesn't look good, don't ask, why would you go about it that way? To understand and get perspective around why you think it's bad. I think that's my biggest advice is be curious. Ask questions. Even when you have an opinion, don't share your opinion. Because you don't know, if you're sharing an opinion, you probably don't know why the person next to you had the reason to do it. So instead of sharing the opinion, ask a question, be curious, and that's going to keep you from coming off as an asshole.
That's a great way, yeah, because you never know all the parameters,
Yeah.
the circumstances around it. Maybe that's all we have time for, that's all we could afford, we have to go. The actors are going to leave, we've only paid for them for one day, we're going to go, we have to go. And you say, well, this looks stupid. Oh my God.
And there's so many times where in my youth, I thought I was helping, and I shared, and I came off as an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
Because that person was stressed out. They did everything they could to achieve what they were looking for, and then now you came over and you gave them what you thought was advice, but really you might have set them off a little bit, or
It's demotivating, right?
Or demotivated them. And so that's why, by getting perspective, maybe you look at that thing and you say, this doesn't look good, and then you learn about all the hardships that they had, and you go, wow, no, that's a great for what they had.
Or
This
fix
is
it in
incredible.
post.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're gonna fix it post. Oh, I got you. That's right.
And when I
That's
was
why it looks like shit. Gotcha.
Well, like Raw, when you look at camera Raw, when it first came out, when it no longer filmed, when it going on to the video, to digital video, and they looked at camera Raw, the cinematographers were so concerned that the directors would never understand that that's not how it's going to look. So they had to come up with the lookup tables
LUTs.
and all the
Mhm.
LUTs.
Yeah. Oh.
So otherwise, they were going to be messed up. So they have to come up with 8 different LUTs. Otherwise, they can't communicate to
Foresee.
the director what it's
Mhm.
going to look like.
Yeah. And so for me, when I was in advertising and I started hiring people into the teams, it was against the HR policies the way that I was hiring, because I wasn't looking for what they knew, what tools they used. I would interview them for their, the way that they saw the world. And then I got them for their way, the ability to imagine things, the ability to represent the target audience that we were going to communicate, but they spoke like them, they could think like them, and they had a certain edge about, them, and the tools they could pick up. And so that my department became the highest grossing department for this huge company, which was run by Ogilvy, which was the leading agency in India. And I took that principle into filmmaking and everything else, because if you know who you're speaking with, if you can follow the way they intuit, then you can work with them. Everything else is just minutia.
He made me think. You made me think about another thing that's changed in modern day is that you don't really need to just specialize in one thing. Like, things are easier now. Yes, you want to be really good at one thing, so that's something that you could find with time. But I think a lot of the pressures when I talk to the youth in modern day is that there's so many options, so much to do. So, but I gotta pick this one thing. But I also like this one. Do all of them. You're gonna get tired of some of them. You're gonna start finding the one that you like the most. You're gonna focus on the one you like the most, and then that's the one that's gonna give you the opportunity, right? So instead of outward searching, a little bit of inward searching.
All right, well, guys, we're out of time. That flew by the way. Thank you very much, and I think that was such a great message to everyone, is really just find yourself, find your passion, and then, of course, don't be an asshole.
Don't be a dick.
Too late, sorry.